My student is engaging in behavior that is a barrier to them learning. In my therapy session, in the classroom, what do I do? Today, we have with us Bailey Payne. She is a board certified behavior analyst and a wealth of information. She wrote a cool book called Behavior Breakthrough, and she says start with the prerequisites. So very important. I think sometimes we get stuck. We get stuck in a situation. Why does the student do this? Why does this always happen when he's with so and so? Why does this always happen when she's with so and so or during this part of the day? We need to get back to the basics. And that's what we discuss today. We also talk about descriptive praise. What is it? Are you using it? And if you're not, you should be. Bailey Payne is a board certified behavior analyst, and she has a wealth of information consulting in schools. She wrote this amazing book, and we are going to break down these topics today. So whether you're supporting students who are autistic learners, students who have ADHD, students who have behavioral barriers to their access of the curriculum, you are going to want to tune in to this episode. I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Welcome to the show. We have a great guest today. We have with us Bailey Payne. Thank you so much, Bailey, for coming on to the show.
Such an honor. Thanks so much for having me, Rose. I appreciate it.
And I think your name popped across my email, my desk, my virtual desk, from my colleague and friend, Leanne Page. I know that you're in her inner circle mastermind. And funny enough, Leanne and myself worked in the same school district in Austin. And neither of us, I think, live in Austin anymore. I'm actually in Ohio here, and I know she lives in a different part of Texas now. So funny how those things come across, but she has so many amazing people in her masterminds, which I think is cool that she does that, because I know when I was starting my business, I remember just messaging people and being like, can you help me? Will you be my mentor? Before I even knew what a mastermind was. Now I'm like, my whole Thursday is like different masterminds, but it's nice to have that support, because when you're doing different things, it feels lonely, and you feel like, how do I get started? And then sometimes you get paralyzed and just the getting started part, right?
Yes, for sure. Leanne Page is so wonderful, and just the perfect BCBA business guru for sure. And it's so hard in 2025 to like be connected to real humans, and it's all just virtual. And so when you find your niche of people that are doing similar things, it's definitely a big win.
It is nice. I love that. That's a great shout out for Leanne. So how did you know that you wanted to become a BCBA? I actually just did this. We just launched this thing called an annual report, something new that we tried this year. And we have about 50,000 people on my email list, and I asked them to fill out this survey. Now, not everybody did, but the people that did, one of the questions is, do you like being a BCBA or do you like being an SLP? And so we just kind of released that as we're taping this today. And it was interesting. Most people are really happy to be a BCBA, but I always think it's really interesting to hear about how people knew about it, because I mean, I've been doing this over 12 years. I've been a BCBA, and it's just rapidly growing. So how did you even know that ABA was a thing, or that you wanted to be a BCBA?
Yep, I didn't. Right. So I'm certified as a behavior analyst. I'm right over 10 years. So,
Nice.
right, like we're kind of more of the like a little bit of the midline dinosaurs in our
Yes.
field, right? It was very new. And I went to a Division II small rural university in Kansas. And so there was no talk of ABA. I actually graduated college with my bachelor's, and my first big girl job was doing child protective services. And I always say,
Wow.
like, that is the job that made me a woman. And it also has laid the foundation of how I view everything and just all interactions with humans and
Wow.
all things training. And it's just that really solidified the foundation of how I just view people. And so that was kind of my first step into the big girl world. And then I started working on
Mhm.
my master's degree in clinical psychology, and that just was not a great fit for me. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're extremely behavior analytic in this program, I would say I was being trained to do like more mental health outpatient work,
Yeah.
and that just
Mhm.
wasn't a good fit for me. But I ended up getting connected with a state hospital where I grabbed a psychology role. And then I got connected with the University of Kansas, where I was a project therapist with the University of Kansas Lifespan Institute. And that's where I got connected with BCBAs for the first time in my life.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us can say this once we found the field of behavioral analysis, it just clicks, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, that's what I want to do. That fits my personality. That's it. And so that's where I gained the knowledge, just kind of getting connected with the University of Kansas and grabbed a super wonderful supervisor that just held my hand and walked me to the finish line.
Oh, that's so nice. And you need that person, right? I think mentorship is so important. That's not exactly what we're talking about today, but it is important. It's nice to, I have like a business coach. I call him my business bestie he just helps me with like tech things that make me nervous, but I don't want to send to my tech team because it'd be more expensive. But it's kind of like my friend, it's become my friend and mentor. And it's just nice to have somebody that is there to guide you. And I think what's interesting is for speech therapists, when we're getting our master's degree in that first year out, we have a clinical fellowship year. So ASHA, our governing body, says, okay, you have to have a CFY, clinical fellowship year supervisor. It's like you have to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But the BCBA hasn't got that
Yeah.
sophisticated yet. I think definitely it will because even I know you've been doing this a while too. The changes that we've seen, like RBT, registered behavioral technician, it wasn't even a thing when I like became certified, right?
Same,
So
same. Yep.
it's just fascinating to see the field growing and like to go to these state level conferences and they'll be like, well, 10 years ago this many people came and now it's like, it's a trend, right? That visual analysis that we love as data collectors and analyzers, but it's fascinating to see how much is changing and in the field. So cool that you
Agreed.
went
And we
that
all
route.
just think without those guides. So,
Right.
yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So you wrote a book recently, which I think is fascinating, and round of applause for you, Bailey, because
Thank you, Rose.
it can't get wait to hear about that. And I just had a publisher that contacted me that wants me to write a book, and then in one of my business masterminds, just like general business mastermind, I had a friend who's a book editor and book coach, and I guess like supporter of people who are writing books. So I talked with her to make sure this was like a legit thing, because I'm always kind of leery of anything,
Right.
especially when people contact me. And she's like, "No, this is good." So anyway, so I might be going on. I just submitted the proposal so this morning, so I might be going through that journey. But you're on the other side, so I'm jealous. And how did you know that you wanted to like write a book? What inspired you to do this?
Again, I don't know that I did. That was just never a goal. Everything for me just kind of just falls in my lap. Like it's just part of the journey, right? And as we fall into those different people that become guides for us, it was just part of, I guess, just a long journey for me. But how it kind of fell into my lap, I would say like COVID. For
Mhm.
sure. We all hit
Yeah.
COVID. And at the time, I was a single mom and I was at home with a
Mm.
toddler. And I wasn't able, at that time, I was only providing direct services. And so families were reaching out to me. They were really hopeless and in deep spots of desperation. And frankly, so was I, because I didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of support at that time. And so
Yeah.
I just started like a Facebook page of just giving like little behavioral bits
Mhm.
to try to
Mhm.
like, hey, focus on this today. Just little, the basics and foundations of ABA. And it kind of just went from there where it wasn't just my families that I directly had contact with that wanted that information. It was more people because we were all drowning in COVID and we couldn't leave our
Yeah.
houses. Um, and so from there, I think it really solidified not just that I wanted to reach people, but also kind of my personal values. I'm from a very rural, tiny town in
Mhm.
Kansas, like dirt roads, no paved roads, no stoplights. Like
Yeah.
that's where I was raised and where I come from. And
Mhm.
I'm passionate about little towns in America like that. And
Yeah.
so it's just so hard for certain areas to reach service to receive services. It's hard for people
Mhm.
to reach services And there's just so many barriers that people face to even access services, whether it's funding, transportation, behaviors in itself, right? Your location. We know all of the barriers. And I just wanted to break those barriers. And so I think for me, social media started that, which kind of just transformed to that's the purpose of my book. It's so
Mm.
hard to find services and especially quality services. So,
Mhm.
how better to just give it to the parents and caregivers and teachers and educators themselves?
I love that. And I think I'm from Ohio. I feel like Ohio, Texas, and actually probably Washington State. I'm also licensed in Washington State. I feel like these states are all kind of similar in the fact that you have your cities that are your larger cities, but when you get outside of that, it's really rural. And I remember driving in certain parts of Ohio, or if I'm just like on a family road trip, I always think of autistic learners in these smaller towns, just like you're
Yep.
saying, not to say that you can't get good services in a smaller town, but the
Right.
barriers that you face are really difficult. And that is never lost on me. I always think that way when I'm driving through really rural areas, which is a lot of what I do here in Ohio and when I lived in Texas, is once you get outside of Austin, it's really rural. And there are a lot of different barriers to accessing therapy and maybe even accessing like good therapy because we know you've been in the field a long time. You know that there's just like with speech therapists and BCBAs, you have to really interview your
Yeah.
providers. And sometimes when parents don't have access in their physical
Yeah.
proximity to be able to go in person, that is something that's was nice about COVID. My business really, I've had it 7 years, almost 8, is once COVID hit, it really just skyrocketed the growth of my business
Yeah.
because I too was sharing just like you organically with people. And it feels good to like be a content creator and to share that information because once somebody sends you a DM or you know that you've helped one person, you're like, oh my gosh, this is my purpose. I need to, put this all together in a cohesive way. So,
Sure.
yeah, I really love that. So, okay, so the book is called Behavior Breakthrough. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. But real quick, I have to go ahead
Yes.
and give you a little encouragement, Rose.
Yes.
I would never call myself an author or even say that this is my book. So I worked with a ghostwriter, and
Oh, okay.
I included her name on the cover. She's
Nice.
Jen Lo Brown.
Okay.
So if you're extremely overwhelmed, and she is so wonderful. I think a lot of ghostwriters. She was just an expert at immersing herself into me and what I was passionate about and just
Yeah,
taking my content, and she really wrote it in a beautiful way.
that's awesome.
This book was created by me sending her audio content only.
Oh, nice.
So,
Okay.
yes, so there is so many different ways to go about creating
Good
a
to
book.
know.
Yes, note
Wrote
that
her
to
name
yourself.
down, Jen. I'll be
Yes,
reaching out. Okay. Yeah.
yes. She's so good.
Yeah.
But yes, that was the makeup of this book,
Yeah. Okay.
just to
Yeah,
fill you
that's
in on
awesome.
that.
But it is all your thought. I mean, but you may not think of yourself as a content creator, but I am in these various masterminds. I went to this really cool content conference. It was actually in Cleveland. It's like a huge deal, and people come from all over, but it's neat because it's kind of in my hometown. And I liked that because I don't know if I identified until kind of then and being entrenched in this online space as a content creator, but that really is what you're doing. It's like you are disseminating the science in whatever way. And now with your book, trying to get people to know that your book is out there, right? That's a whole other layer of marketing and sharing. Yeah, right. It's exhausting. But you are creating this content to share. And I think it's cool that because it's not easy to do to get up and disseminate and say, like, this is what I'm going to do with the world. This is like why I want to do this, because these are all really, really big projects. So in this book, you discuss 12 skills to transform behavior at home and in the classroom, which sounds really delightful and something that is very
Yeah,
much
right.
needed. But can you talk us through some of these skills or kind of how to get started with the fundamentals?
Yeah, so I think the book I really just structured it is the structure of how I train all parents and caregivers and teachers. I do a lot of consulting in schools. And I think that sometimes when we go in and we want to engage in some type of a training, we usually start with those big disruptive challenging behaviors, and
Mm-hmm.
we start training on the functions of behavior and driving those interventions. And I think what gets lost in the adherence, right, and true mastery of the skills that we're trying to train on is that we didn't train any prerequisite skills to be able to truly understand the why and maintain the skills that we're teaching. And so these 12 skills that I've identified really serve the purpose to kind of fill in those prerequisite skills and really provide an understanding of why, right? If we want teachers and parents to change, and just all professionals, right? If we want to change somebody's habits, I need to know why because that takes so much emotional and cognitive work to change my own, habits that I need to know why so that way I'm more likely to do it with consistency and fidelity. And so just to kind of give you an example, I think the very first skill well, first I go over just very easy brief data collection, but then once we get into the like nuts and bolts of the skills, it's just descriptive praise, right? Like those things of if I'm going to want somebody to implement an intervention to change behavior, we have to be able to set up the environment in an effective way to make it lasting. And
Hmm.
so going into why is descriptive praise so important and talking about how that builds language and how it brings comprehension of your behavior to the environment. And that's how we teach how to reliably access our attention, right?
Hmm.
Just purely by utilizing descriptive praise and specific praise. That's how we teach our children and students how to reliably access our attention so that those undesired behaviors become less frequent and they learn that they're not reliable at accessing attention. But because of using descriptive praise, that's
Hmm.
my teaching of those positive replacement behaviors to increase those prosocial behaviors. So just that's kind of each skill is set up with what is it, and then the why, and then some
Hmm.
examples and like a little interactive section.
Oh, I love that. So, can you, for listeners, because we have a lot of, I know what you mean when you say descriptive praise and specific praise, but not everybody, I think, would understand what that means. So, can you give us some examples of some examples and some non-examples, right? Of what is descriptive praise and what would be some ideas of praise that is not specific? Because when I first started in applied behavior analysis, that was a light bulb moment for me too. Like, oh, wow, that's really different than I was trained, or just catching kids being good, right? I feel like that's really different because I am a school-based clinician 2 days a week as a speech therapist and have always been school-based in some capacity over the past 20 years. And it's really not everywhere, but I would do a lot of consulting. Like when I lived in Austin, I had this kind of administrative role in these 30 schools, and I go out and visit people. And sometimes kids don't get attention unless they're being reprimanded. And sometimes staff don't realize that is even happening. They might call me out to their campus and say, "Hey, Rose, can you come out and see me? I have this kid that's doing XYZ." And then I come out, and before I even see anything, they go, "Oh, I know what I've been doing." It's like my mere presence is like having them think through what's actually happening in this dynamic. But I'm sure you see that a lot in different places because when you're the professional that's in the behavioral moment, that's in the trenches, sometimes you can't even see a way forward. You're like, I don't know why this person's doing this every time we have circle or morning meeting or lunch or whatever it is. But can you give us some of those examples of exactly what you mean by descriptive praise? Because I don't think that everybody is taught to do that.
Yeah, and I think just normalizing that we all get stuck, right? Like I experienced that too as a parent, where, it's a Saturday and we're at home all day and I'm checked out and just also enjoying a little cognitive break for
Yeah.
myself, whatever. And then I find myself just interrupting my kids when they're fighting. That's my only interactions all day, right?
Right.
And then what's more reliably going to happen? My children are arguing and then I come and I solve their problems and we get stuck in these ruts, right? Whereas descriptive praise is about, just like you said, it's about catching them being good on the front end to teach students and children how to reliably access attention. So it's not just saying good job. It's not just saying way to go, because I don't specifically know in those circumstances what you're talking about. But when I say, love how you're sitting quietly with your hands in your lap, that is reliably teaching how to access a teacher or a parent's attention in that moment. When I say, I love how you asked with a calm voice and then you waited for me to respond, that's that descriptive praise that really teaches wait before interrupting, right? It's specifically describing how to reliably access attention so we're more likely to see those behaviors in the future.
And I think this sounds like a great book for kids. I've been working with students who have ADHD, which is not something that
Yeah.
I've known a lot about until recently. And so I've been reading a lot of books about it and kind of following some people who discuss it, content creators who have ADHD. But I think a lot of these things too, because if you're working in the schools, you probably see a lot of kids who are not autistic. They don't have a label as being autistic, but there's a lot of kids who struggle with behavior. And there's a lot of teachers who struggle with, well, how do I help this kid kind of get through their day? Because something I've been learning about ADHD is that it's almost like school is a war zone if you're not getting like the right supports. Do you see that in your public school consults?
Absolutely. And I think that we can say in 2025, most teachers are drowning in behaviors.
Yeah.
That's their number one request for help. And it's the number one parent's request, too. I
Yeah.
think that we have so many barriers in 2025 with technology. And then, of course, we're
Yeah.
now more aware of symptoms related to ADHD and different skill deficits, like executive functioning skill deficits that require teaching. And our typical
Yes.
discipline hasn't been working. And so I think that, yes, this book is not just intended for individuals with autism, even though I have, a behavioral analytic background, but it really is just a way of interacting with all humans to change behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is your recommendation when you're consulting with your book if a student is starting to have some problem behavior that's a barrier to their learning? What are some of the first steps that you have people kind of identify how to remedy that situation and how to support that student, really?
Yep. So, I mean, it's the structure of this book. When I'm going in to work with a teacher that's in desperate need of help, or even just a parent, I always start with those prerequisite skills. Of course, we've got all the baseline data collection. Teachers and professionals are so familiar with that. But I
Hmm.
think until we really go in, and just like you said, sometimes we miss the boat on where's the attention been delivered and all of those things. Diving into like just the first few skills, descriptive praise, and then how to state things positively without focusing on the problems and labeling all the things that I don't want to see, and how to appropriately deliver a preferred outcome without accidentally, inadvertently reinforcing behaviors that we don't want to see without accidentally making those issues worse, right? And how to offer choices and use first then contingencies, right? These are just a few of the skills that I go into,
Hmm.
and I just work through this as a hierarchy. And then at the very end is becoming aware of behavioral function. And then we get to pick effective reinforcers, right? It's
Right.
so hard for a teacher or a parent without a behavior analyst next to them guiding their every move. How do you even pick an effective reinforcer? Because we see people where they're trying lots of different things and they're like, their behavior's not trying or their behavior's not changing. Well, that's
Right.
because you've tried rewards and not reinforcers. And how do we
Yeah.
know what an effective reinforcer is without truly understanding behavioral function? So I think in summary, I mean, it's just a marathon. There is no miracle fix, and this book is not a miracle fix, right? It's intended to really just read one skill at a time, try that skill, utilize that skill, see how that
Hmm.
impacts your home or your classroom, and then go on to the next skill to where you're just slowly building this foundation to where once you get down to reinforcement and selecting behavioral function, you can do so more effectively.
Yeah, kind of like behavioral skills training, right? Where we're going to learn about something and then we're going to have an extension activity where we're implementing it. That's how I learn. And then we get feedback, right? And I'm sure your book is acting as that kind of that feedback loop of people are kind of taking this on. And you probably just started this kind of organically by doing consulting in the schools. So one thing that I have found, because my role as ABA speech has grown, back in the day, I spent a lot of time directly working with students who had behavioral barriers that were very unsafe, everybody using an AAC device, to now my focus is a little bit more on ABA speech. And I still see kids clinically, but I'm not always seeing that type of learner. But what I have found in more of a general education setting, because that's some of the students that I'm serving, is that teachers have struggle with this continuum of behavior that may be happening in a general education classroom where they may see a student who needs some help with prompting to get started on an assignment, or maybe a student that's asking to leave the classroom, or a student that is engaging in some mild disruptive behaviors, and them thinking, okay, this student needs a one-on-one support, or this student needs like a separate classroom. And I think it's hard because, like you said, every teacher, and I find too, speech therapists, oftentimes when I do public speaking or paid speaking engagements, they want to talk about behavior because it's something that is touching everybody's lives, including our students, right? They're not behaving this way because it's fun. They don't want to be in trouble or anything like that. But do you find that it's hard for teachers to work with students who maybe not are not in a resource room, but are exhibiting some problem behaviors. Is that something that you spend time doing?
For sure. I think that's the biggest barrier is that once behaviors start, right? Teachers are so overloaded, right?
Yeah.
They're not getting their planning periods. They're not taking lunches. I mean, I've never met a teacher that goes into teaching for malicious reasons, right?
Right.
These are loving people,
Right.
but they're so overwhelmed. And so many teachers, they didn't get that behavioral training and as a part of
Right.
their programs and their education that they've gone through, and so they're just doing their best and they're just drowning. And so
Yeah.
that is the barrier, is once a behavior is occurring in the classroom, just like you said, somebody needs to come help this student with their behavior, and when they're ready to learn, return them. And
Right.
there's not enough behavior
Yes.
people in the district to do that.
No.
Like
Right.
in a perfect world, sure, I could come push in and provide the services and model all, like, but there's just not enough of us. And I'm not saying that it's the teacher's fault or the district's fault. Like, it's
Hmm.
just how it is in public education. And so at the end of the day, we can either wait for this miracle to be solved by this fairy that comes in and solves all the issues in gen ed classrooms, or we can disseminate this information, get it into teachers' hands so that
Right.
they can have the skills needed to be able to handle multiple behaviors at that mild level at the same time.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like your book would be like a good. I know when I was, working more in the schools, we had to have a goal or a professional development goal, but it sounds like behavior breakthrough might be a good book study for people over the course of a year where they get together, they read the chapters. Because you're right. It's like everybody wants to feel really confident walking into their classroom, or every speech therapist wants to feel confident when they get every single student. But if we didn't have that training, which oftentimes people don't, then we're just feeling kind of stuck and we're feeling like what we're doing isn't
Yeah.
helping our student, and we're feeling frustrated. So I feel like that your book kind of helps with that. And you probably just organically, by doing your consults, because I've been a consultant for many years, you just think like, okay, this is helpful, then we do this, and then we. But I like the idea of with just starting with the power of descriptive praise, because I think if you're not a BCBA, I don't know if you're always taught that. I remember for working at the now it's called the Learner School. It's a specialized non-public program here as part of the Cleveland Clinic. That was my first, I call it my ABA boot camp. And I learned about descriptive praise, and I was like, oh, wow, this is really, I love this. Yeah, let's catch the kids being goods, because these were kids that really had very unsafe problem behaviors, and that's why they were attending this particular program. And so it was important to kind of increase the communication, decrease the problem behavior, so they could kind of go back to their home school district for their least restrictive environment. But I like that, because thinking about like, how do we even get started? Usually we get started on saying like, well, what is the exact behavior and why is it
Yeah.
occurring? But you're saying like, let's start here. Let's start with the prerequisites. So I think that is a nice first easy step for educators. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Where can people find out more about you and your work? Do you have a website that people can go to, or are you on Instagram?
Yes, I have www.baileypayne.com. And then my Facebook is Behavior Breakthrough with Bailey Payne. And then I am on Instagram, behavior_breakthrough. And then like 2 weeks ago, I just started a TikTok at
Oh
Behavior
man.
Breakthrough.
Oh
So I
man.
don't know. We're giving it a try. It's a wild one.
Yes, it is. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bailey. Congrats on the book, and it was great to connect.
Thanks so much, Rose.